A U.S. green card holding Palestinian man has been detained for organizing anti-genocide protests at Columbia University. Someone explain to me how this is any different than what has happened to the J6 protesters. And many of you might combat that and say, no, no, this is different. This is different because this is terrorism. But what is the exact difference? Because that is exactly what liberals claimed, is that there was an insurrection and terrorists were taking over the Capitol. Are you a yo-yo dieter? You diet, you lose weight, but then you gain it all back plus a few extra pounds, and later you lose it and regain it again and again. Well, that's dangerous. Studies show that can increase your risk of heart attack, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and other health problems. Breaking free of your yo-yo diet pattern is a main reason doctors created Lean. Lean is a supplement, not an injection. You don't need a prescription. The science behind Lean is really impressive. Its natural ingredients target weight loss in 3 powerful ways. Lean helps maintain healthy blood sugar, it helps control appetite and cravings, and it helps burn fat by converting fat into energy. So listen, if you're tired of losing weight and gaining it back, if you want to lose meaningful weight at a healthy pace, Lean was created for you. And let me get you started with 20% off when you enter Kim20 at takelean.com. That is Kim20 at takelean.com, or you could use that QR code and it'll take you right there. But again, takelean.com, use code Kim20 for that 20% off. Let's go over what has happened here. So the White House tweeted this out. Yes, the White House has its own Twitter account or X account or whatever. And they put this out. Shalom Muhammad. ICE proudly apprehended and detained Muhammad Khalil, a radical foreign pro-Hamas student on the campus of Columbia University. This is the first arrest of many to come. They shared this photo, arrested by ICE on March 9th, 2025, led activities aligned to Hamas. What does that mean exactly, led activities aligned to Hamas? Now, remember, whenever you're looking at these types of situations, you always, and we'll go over a situation like this here in a second, another protest that I am personally not on the side of the protesters at all, but I believe in the American right to protest. And not just the American right of, because I'm a U.S. citizen, I have the right, but the right on U.S. soil to protest, even if you're not an American citizen. And this gentleman is a U.S. green card holding citizen. He is married to an American, he's a U.S. green card holder. He is married to a U.S. citizen who is pregnant with his child that's going to be born in 1 month. So he has an American wife, an American child. He himself is a green card holder. He should be afforded all the same rights as especially when it comes to free speech. That is what we pride ourselves on here in the United States. That is one of our main rights that keeps us a democracy. And rather than reeling into an authoritarian system where you can't criticize the government, you can't criticize authority. So here Trump puts out a statement. Trump's statement on this, this is what he says. Following my previously signed executive orders, ICE proudly apprehended and detained Muhammad Khalil, a radical foreign pro-Hamas student on the campus of Columbia University. This is the first arrest of many to come. We know there are more students at Columbia and other universities across the country who have engaged in pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic, anti-American activity, and the Trump administration will not tolerate it. Many are not students, they are paid agitators. We will find, apprehend, and deport these terrorist sympathizers from our country, never to return again. If you support terrorism, including the slaughtering of innocent men, women, and children, your presence is contrary to our national and foreign policy interests, and you are not welcome here. We expect every one of America's colleges and universities to comply. Thank you, says Donald Trump. This is the most fascist, insane thing I have seen. That's what this is. Whether you supported Donald Trump or not, you have to admit that this is highly alarming, authoritarian, and completely antithetical to the concept of free speech. These people are protesting, and now they're being locked up and detained. And because they're being detained by ICE and they're facing deportation, we don't know where they are. We don't know what's going on. What we do know is that he's a green card holder, which means he is entitled to due process. So the laws have to work. And I don't think this is going to hold up in court. I think that these types of cases are going to go on to the court system, and the court's going to say, sorry, Donald Trump and the administration, but we actually are a country that allows for free speech. So you're allowed to protest in this country, even protest things that you don't agree with. Sorry, you don't agree with the protest. Sorry, you want to categorize that protest as an insurrection, or you want to categorize that protest as being pro-Hamas or supporting terrorists, or whatever you want to think, however you personally want to label it. It doesn't matter how you personally feel about that protest. You might personally have looked at J6 and thought, oh, these are all insurrectionists. They're anti-American. They're fascists. They're insane. You might have personally felt that way. And many people were locked up because of those personal feelings of the liberals who watched that whole thing unfold and decided to go after all of these protesters. It doesn't matter what your personal feelings are. What matters is we have rights in this country, and those rights are free speech and the right to protest and the right to protest our leaders and the right to speak up and say we don't agree with the happenings of a foreign country, of all things, on top of it. I mean, he's talking about protecting a foreign nation now. So what this has said, what this has taught people, is that all non-U.S. citizens, that even if they're legally here in the United States on visas or on green cards, if you are not a U.S. citizen and even you've never committed a crime before, you are not allowed to protest. You're not allowed to protest, but very specifically, you're not allowed to protest a foreign government, Israel. That's who you're not allowed to protest. My guess is, had this guy been out there protesting the NCAA and their allowing of trans, male athletes to compete against women, my guess is he would have been applauded and be told that he's a hero. But because he was protesting against Israel, he's now rounded up in our country and potentially deported, never to see his wife and child again, unless they go to Palestine, where we're bombing Palestine. So him and his wife and his child might get murdered, American citizens murdered by American bombs used by Israel. And that's the fate that we're putting on this person for advocating for his people as a U.S. green card holder, advocating for the Palestinians to not be genocided. That's what he was advocating for. And people want to categorize that and say, no, that's Hamas activities. You're tied to Hamas. You're tied to Hezbollah. And you've got to prove that in court. You've got to prove that he was actually a militant member of Hamas or a militant member of Hezbollah or providing weapons and material support to them in some way. You cannot just categorize anything you don't like when it comes to Palestine as just Hamas. But that is what's happening under the Trump administration. So this whole notion of there was going to be free speech under the Trump administration and finally the days of political persecution are over, that is not what we're seeing here. We're seeing clear violations of that claim that this was going to be the party of free speech. This is not. It's the party of the speech they want. And if you are against that speech, or if you're saying things they don't like, they will lock you up and they will throw you out of the country if they can. Now, they know they can't actually get away with this when it comes to American citizens. And if they think that this is going to somehow curb the activities of these protests, they're wrong. This is just meant to send a message. And if you think it's going to stop at green card holders and non-citizens, you're wrong in thinking that. It begins here. And then you're next as an American citizen, not allowed to protest against your own government, against a foreign government, without potentially losing everything and being locked up. Just unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. I'm very surprised about. I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised. This administration has just shown that they will do anything and everything that Israel wants, what the pro-Jewish Israeli Zionist lobby wants. And if they're sitting there saying any sort of protest against Israel is now anti-Semitism against all Jews, they got what they paid for. I mean, this is what $250 million will buy you. But when Trump says here, I want to point this particular sentence out, what he says: we know that there are more students at Columbia and other universities across the country who have engaged in pro-terrorist. What is pro-terrorist activities? When he says they have engaged in pro-terrorist activities, you have to define what terrorism is, and no one's really been able to do that very clearly. Everybody's a terrorist. Oh, you're a Catholic, you're a terrorist. Oh, you're a PTA, you're a mom mad at the PTA, you're a terrorist. I mean, if you're anti-COVID mandates, you're a terrorist. You're a J6 protester, you're a terrorist. You're MAGA, you're a terrorist. You see how this word is used? That's why you can't let your personal emotions get in the way of whether or not a protest should be allowed to happen. You have to just say all protests, whether I like them or not, are allowed to happen. Now, it's one thing if this student started to actually violate laws in this country, actual criminal laws, but he didn't, because they're not charging him with any criminal laws. And that's how you know that he did not actually commit a crime. He didn't hit anybody, hurt anybody, assault, harass, or actually or actually give military support or weapons or anything to any of these terrorist groups. Otherwise, they'd be slapping it with actual criminal charges, which Jen and Eunice, a wonderful attorney, she was very much part of the anti-mandate crowd. She's, again, in my opinion, on the right side of history, being against genocide and standing up for the rights of Americans here in this country. And this is what she has said. The ICE detention of Mohammed Khalil, a Palestinian green card holder, is among the most frightening authoritarian crackdowns on free speech in my lifetime. Khalil clearly did not do anything to warrant deportation. If he had committed a serious crime, the government would be using criminal law to go after him. This is also evidenced by the nebulous language the government is using. Khalil engaged in activities aligned to Hamas. What does it mean to be aligned to Hamas? The evidence to date suggests that this simply means he believes in Palestinians' right to self-determination, as again, he has provided material support to terrorism or the like. He would be prosecuted under the applicable law. Members of the Trump admin made clear that they intend to use all means at their disposal to silence protected pro-Palestine speech, and they are making an example of Khalil. In a particularly gratuitous act of cruelty, the government transferred him to a facility in Louisiana, presumably so his 8-month pregnant wife cannot easily visit him, and likely also in hopes of getting before a more favorable, read conservative, judge. This should really outrage the entire pro-free speech crowd. This is not what you voted for, I don't think, unless you voted for free speech for me and not for thee. Congressman Mike Lawler, let me actually show you that one. Where is Congressman Mike Lawler? Here he is. Okay. Congressman Mike Lawler put this out. He says, this is great news. He's a congressman of New York. He says, this is great news. It's long past time to restore order and uphold the integrity of America's higher education. And he put it with this image that his staff created. ICE arrests Palestinian leader of Colombia's anti-Israel protests, revoking student visa and green card. So at least they're saying it the way it is. He's actually putting it out there the way it is. It's anti-Israel. So you're not allowed to protest Israel in America. Could you imagine if we said that about China or Russia or Turkey or any of these other countries? You're not allowed to protest China in this country. A Palestinian activist who led the disruptive anti-Israel protests at both Columbia University and Barnard College has been arrested by ICE agents at his campus apartment, according to his lawyer. Mohammed Khalil, a former graduate student who got his undergraduate degree in Beirut and completed his studies at Ivy League Columbia in December, also reportedly faces having his visa revoked and his green card canceled following President Trump's crackdown on unrest at colleges. So you're cracking down on, might as well say it for what it is. President Trump's crackdown on protests, because that's the type of country we are. I'm sorry, I did not sign up for this. I didn't sign up for this. And I feel bad for those of you that did. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I did not vote for Donald Trump. I didn't vote for him because I suspected this type of thing would happen. Well, he clearly said it in his campaign speech, and I believed him. I mean, that's what it boiled down to. I believed him. I believed what he said. And he said what he meant. He was going to crack down on this. I did not understand how people could think that this was going to be the administration of free speech. Yes, many of us gained free speech in certain subjects, but then you get cracked down on others. And this is absolutely should be unacceptable to every single American. This should be completely and totally unacceptable. This is Jesse Singal, who says, I asked an immigration attorney I trust and have some dealings with whether the Mohammed Khalil case represents scary territory. He said yes, and this is what the immigration attorney said. Says, it is very scary territory. The State Department can't revoke someone's green card. Green card holders have a right to due process. He would have to be put into rescission and removal proceedings, and his case would have to be decided by an immigration judge. Relatedly, he has a right to see his charges. What specifically is DHS saying he did to render his green card status invalid, which would lead to a referral to an immigration judge? That he is even in the process itself is scary and unheard of. There's some unusual things going on with the process, but it's moving similarly to other cases I've seen. I saw reports this morning that he's being held at Jena, Louisiana detention facility. If he was transferred from New Jersey, New York to Jena, the ICE detainee locator wouldn't have been up to date yesterday. The website typically takes between a day and a couple of days to update, but that he was transferred to Jena to begin with is troubling. First, if he was being put into rescission proceedings, it is very weird that he's being held in immigration detention pending a hearing. Normally, he should have been issued a notice of intent to rescind and informed of when and where his hearing date is scheduled for. Second, New Jersey, New York have their own immigration detention facilities and enough immigration judges to handle cases. So there's no reason for him to be transferred to Jenna. Normally, people are only transferred from the detention facility in the location of their arrest to a processing center in the South. Jenna in Alabama is what I've seen the most after their case is heard and the government is preparing for physical removal. Additionally, the Jenna detention facility itself has a bad history of prisoner mistreatment. So he was transferred there as a form of punishment. It wasn't because of this is just the process and we're just going through the process because we're a law-abiding country. Instead, it's we're going to punish you and make it to that your wife and child cannot see you. You won't be able to see your child at this facility. You know, your wife won't be able to come in with the baby or anything like that, depending on how long you're being held here. And you know that this is as scary as what had happened to the J6 protesters. Now, I wrote that on X. I said, this is as scary as what's going on against the J6 protesters. And I got a fair amount of pushback from people saying, no, this is totally different because the J6 protesters were Americans. Now, America has a free speech for all policy. That is what we stand for as a country. That's how we criticize other countries who crack down on protesters, do not allow dissent in their nations. We say, this is an anti-Western value. We don't just say, look, only for those on American soil who happen to also be American citizens, which, by the way, the Constitution applies to everybody standing on American soil. So even if you're not a U.S. citizen, if you're here, you're subject to our laws. That is true anywhere in the world. If you are going to the country, a foreign country, you're subject to their laws. And while you're on their soil, you have to abide by their laws. You don't get to walk around with your American passport saying, but I'm an American. I've got extra special privileges here. I've got my American rights. That's not really true. And the same, it's vice versa. And we say to these other countries, you are not upholding what we consider to be democratic values. Well, what are democratic values? And I know we use that and weaponize in order to topple governments and whatnot, but let's just look at it for, if we actually meant it. We actually would say to countries, look, we believe in democracy and a free people, and we want you to, we're going to criticize that you don't have a democracy or a free people. Right. Fair enough. So what are we doing? What are we doing here with this? You're not a free person if you're in the United States and you're not a U.S. citizen. That is not what we believe. We believe all people, regardless of their citizenship, regardless of where they come from, where they stand, they should have the right to protest and the right to dissent, and especially against a foreign government. People then also commented saying things like, well, we don't like people who hate America. I'm sorry, he's protesting Israel. Since when did you conflate the two? Oh, right, you've been gaslit because so many of you are already conflating the two. Israel and the United States are not the same country. And push comes to shove, Israel will look out for itself. It won't look out for us when times get tough. If it has to choose between itself and us, it's choosing itself. We should maybe do the same thing and uphold our own values. And what kind of an ally with Western values is telling us to crack down on these protests anyway? And why are we even doing it? Very, very scary. Do not like to see this. We'll continue to follow the case and criticize it, quite frankly. Another alarming event that happened over the weekend, that it's another crackdown on protests that I've seen. This is JD Vance. So JD Vance says, today while walking my 3-year-old daughter, a group of Slava Ukraini protesters followed us around and shouted as my daughter grew increasingly anxious and scared. I decided to speak with the protesters in the hopes that I could trade a few minutes of conversation for them leaving my toddler alone. Nearly all of them agreed. It was a mostly respectful conversation, but if you're chasing a 3-year-old as part of a political protest, you're a shit person, says JD Vance. Okay. So many thoughts on this one. I agree that if you are chasing a 3-year-old as part of a political protest, you are a shit person. Like if you decide to go and protest the children of a politician, then yeah, you're probably not, you don't have any ethics or morals. But to me, that would mean you're showing up at their school, you're harassing the children. So you are seeking out the kids and you're protesting in front of the children specifically. Not the same thing as you, the vice president of the United States. You agreed to that job. You knew what the job was. It's not like this is just some unfortunate event that happened to you. You accepted becoming the vice president of the United States and you were elected into the position. So what makes you think you wouldn't be met with protesters every single time you walk out of your house. I would think if you are the vice president or leader of a country that is very politically charged, that is very divided, you could just expect that every day there's probably going to be protesters. That's just part of the job, actually. And that's part of being an American. Americans are allowed to protest, and you're a political person. So people are probably going to protest you. And so what are you doing walking your 3-year-old? That to me is a bit, quite frankly, irresponsible. Now, is it sure, should the 3-year-old be able to have a life where she can walk with her dad? Yes. But her dad chose to become vice president of the United States. So your dad made the choice to become a politician and knew what the consequences would be and what life would be like. Do you think it's really safe in your opinion for a 3-year-old? We could flip this around a bit. Should a 3-year-old be surrounded by men with guns at all times? Because that's what's happening. Secret Service is surrounding JD Vance and the 3-year-old. Should children be subject to guns, being surrounded by men with guns every single day? Do you think that's frightening? It's the choice he made when he became vice president of the United States, when he decided to become a politician. These are the sacrifices that he made. He put those sacrifices on his family. His children will not have normal childhoods in any stretch of the imagination. Even if they never saw a protest, the children of the vice president of the United States of America would not have normal childhoods. It's just not going to happen. They're going to have very different, and for many, envious childhoods. So for him to think that he could just walk for one, he says walking my 3-year-old like she's a dog, but walking with his 3-year-old, he had a stroller, so he's pushing his 3-year-old in a stroller. I mean, for him to think that he could walk around without protesters in public is, to me, but beyond asinine thinking. I mean, if you're a politician, come on, give me a break. That's like a celebrity being like, I just want to be able to go outside and not have paparazzi. Oh, you're going to get paparazzi everywhere you go. Now, there are rules. They can't publish the images of your children, but they are allowed to take pictures of you with your kids. That's what paparazzi do. You cannot use your children as human shields, which is essentially what JD Vance did here. He was using his child, and I'll show you the evidence. This is what he's conveying is not what happened. And that to me is also the scariest part about this. The real scary takeaway of his tweet here, and him trying to say, these protesters were chasing my 3-year-old, is he's trying to get you to basically be against protests, to be against these protesters, and to want to limit their activities. This is another crackdown on protests that the administration doesn't like. And the way they're trying to get you on that is by throwing a 3-year-old at you, is by saying, but the 3-year-old, have some decency. They weren't showing up to the preschool. And let me just show you where they were. JD Vance's house is back along that road in the back. And let me just show you the full screen here. So these protesters, the police had blocked off that street. So no one's allowed to even go back to where his house is. The protesters were standing on the corner of the street protesting. They were not chasing him around, harassing his 3-year-old. He would have to go to them in order to get harassed by these protesters. He would have to have actively taken his 3-year-old and put that 3-year-old in this situation. His choice to do that, knowing that there were protesters there. These people didn't just pop up. But he wanted to take his 3-year-old on a walk, and he wanted to, so that he could put this tweet out there for what? Now, I don't even agree with these protesters because I'm not on the side of Slava Ukraine. I want to see the end of the war. I'm not on their side, but I am on their side as Americans, or even as just people in America and their right to protest. And if they, and that is the job. If you accept the job as VP, you're going to be protested for a variety of different things. And some of them might be really bizarre and off the wall, and you never even heard of it before. And some of them might be something like this, or pro-Palestine, anti-genocide protests, whatever it is. But what really alarms me the most is the fact that JD Vance has been able to rile up the base, the conservative free speech base, once again, that the Trump admin said they were all about, and then Trump says we've arrested these protesters, and people now that said they were free speech are cheering. These people are now cheering crackdowns on free speech. And JD Vance saying, my 3-year-old, you're chasing a 3-year-old as part of a political protest, you're a shit person. And people are like, yeah, shut down these protests. This is a way, it's an emotional way to get people to go along with quite an authoritarian position, which is we don't want to see these protests at all. Now, let me show you this video here, because this proves that JD was actually completely exaggerating the situation in order to get you to want to crack down on protesters.
What we called up, they said, the Russians said, was an illegal war there.
Well, sir, I agree. Actually, the Russians do have some manpower problems. The Ukrainians have more manpower problems. The Russians are larger, their armies are larger, they have more population, they have more military age males and females.
Exactly.
So just so you know what we're looking at here, this is J.D. Vance. See how these protesters are very calm. They're listening to him. He's talking. And he's basically, and I respect him for this a lot. This part I like. I like a lot that J.D. Vance went down there and he decided to talk to the protesters. And you don't really see that much from a politician where they actually engage with the protesters. This should be commended. This is very American of him. This is what we want to see from politicians. I just didn't like the subsequent tweet of him then being like, these people are all shit people because they were chasing my 3-year-old. When we can actually see in this video, they weren't doing that. They were protesting on the corner, as we saw in the last video. He's now talking to them. And they actually do agree, as you'll see in this video, to leave him alone now that he's heard them out. And they're not chasing his 3-year-old. But that phrase, putting that in there in that tweet, was meant to get you to want to crack down on protesters. It's meant to get you to go along. It's manufacturing that consent of, look, when we go after protesters, it's because we have to. Look what they're doing. Well, let's keep watching.
That's why we should be supporting.
Like, what do you think it's up to the Ukrainians to decide what they want to do?
Well, again, their support, their ability to continue fighting is definitely dependent on the Americans.
Right, so you're yanking for what
I
people
told
are
the gentleman-
dying.
What I told the gentleman earlier is that we think it's in the best interest of our country, and frankly in the best interest of the Ukrainians for the war to stop. No one has articulated strategies.
Never came to
Selling them out. Absolutely.
I respect them. I disagree. I think that what we're doing is we're actually forcing a diplomatic settlement. That if you
Okay.
talk to Joe
Nobody in Ukraine
Biden,
better.
All right. So he's, they're giving their perspective. You're selling them out. They're very pro-Ukraine. They want to keep the war going. And JD's having a nice conversation. I think a very good. I mean, again, I like seeing this. I like seeing this a lot. Let me just jump ahead because this video is kind of long. So let me just jump ahead to the end.
has no integrity. I have more respect for you. Ma'am, look at my 3-year-old daughter now. And I told you, I talked to you for 5 minutes.
Signed up for this job,
And now-
that's what you agreed. Yeah, you didn't sign up for
I did not
why
agree
people
to
are
have my
yelling at him.
3-year-old to have people run around and yell at her. And I did talk to you, and I had said, if I talk to you for a few minutes, will you leave my 3-year-old daughter alone? And you said yes. So I'd like you guys to respect that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And they agreed at the end. They agreed. Now, they were not chasing his 3-year-old, harassing his 3-year-old. He happened to have his 3-year-old with him. And they weren't chasing, but they were certainly yelling at him. And maybe they were following him if he decided to go out in public away from where the barrier was. But the guy's got Secret Service all around him. Nobody's chasing him or hurting him. And if the protesters are out there shouting at him, yes, that's what happens when you're when you're a politician of a highly charged political country. That's what happens. You get protested at. That's the job. That's actually the job. And it's the job of the American to make their voices heard. So I like what he did here talking to the protesters. I don't think the protesters did anything wrong at all. I don't think it's right for him to use his 3-year-old as a human shield. I think, yes, his children should have daddy, time and all of that, but you got to be realistic. You chose a certain job and you're not able to do certain things the way, like normal people can do. You just can't be normal, unfortunately. Whether you're a celebrity or a major politician, you just can't quite be normal. So you put that on your kids and you have to accept that. That means you might have to give up these out and about walks. Have somebody else do it. I'm sure you got a nanny, or whatever, or just don't do them and play inside instead. And, that's the job. And I feel bad for the kids that have to grow up that way because especially at 3-year-old, they don't really understand why they're having to give up a normal childhood because they don't understand that daddy's the vice president of the United States. That doesn't really quite register. But when they're older, they'll be really proud that the fact that they're the children of the former vice, and they'll be really freaking rich. So nobody should feel sad for them because, when he's done with all that, who knows, he might be the next president, or he'll at least be able to write a bunch of books, go on book tours, and make a lot of money. So I just want to showcase that all of this together, what Trump is doing and what J.D. Vance did by claiming, these protesters are shit people. This is a crackdown on a fundamental, sacrosanct American value, which is free speech. And we absolutely have to guard that free speech with our lives. We have to guard it with our lives if it comes down to it. And that's got to be free speech, no matter what the speech is. Whether you like the speech, you like the protest, or you don't agree with it, you don't agree with the protest, we have to protect that right, because that right keeps us a free people. And this administration over the weekend has, quite frankly, very much frightened me when it comes to the protection of our free speech rights. This was just a clip from the full Kim Iverson show, which is Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Head to KimIversonShow.com to catch the full thing. See you there.